Hey guys, so you should have had this chart filled out from yesterday. We are going to need it because that is what we will be using to discuss, kind of to help us out, I guess, really with what we are doing. So if you open up the notes page from today, you will notice, so yesterday we really just looked at the perfect squares, the things that have perfect side lengths. So for example, if I have a square that has an area of 9 units squared, I know if I take the square root of 9, it gives me side lengths of 3, because obviously 3 squared equals 9. However, there are things that are not perfect. So I have the first 15 perfect squares listed. However, there are situations where you are going to have numbers that fall in between here. So, or not, well, I guess that one doesn't really work. Actually, so let me go further down. So you're going to have numbers that fall in between here. So like the square root of 5, the square root of 6, the square root of 7, the square root of 8. They all fall in between these two numbers right here. So if we're going to look at the first one, we have the square root of 37. So if I go back up here to my list, I'm going to scan along my list here and see what numbers 37 falls between. So I see that it falls right here between the square root of 36 and the square root of 49. So it falls right in here somewhere. So I know it's going to fall in between the perfect squares of the square root of 36 and the square root of 49. I know that the square root of 36 is 6 and the square root of 49 is 7. So the square root of 37 is going to fall somewhere in between the whole numbers of 6 and 7. So it's going to fall somewhere in between, if I have 6, I have 6.5, and I have 7. It's going to fall somewhere in between 6 and 7. So if you were to guess if it would be closer to 6 or to 7, I want you to take just a second and think, man, would it be closer to 6 or would it be closer to 7? If you guessed 6, you're right, because the square root of 36, the next one would be the square root of 37. So I know that it is going to be pretty close right here. We will estimate it here in a little bit with the calculator. So I will show you how to type it in your calculator here in a little bit to estimate it. So you may have guessed 6.1 as an estimation. The next one we're going to look at is the square root of 152. So I'm going to go back up here to my perfect squares chart, and I'm going to go down and I'm going to say, okay, where does 152 fall in between? Okay, it falls in between 144 and 169. So I know that it is going to fall between the square root of 144 and the square root of 169. The square root of 144 and the square root of 169. Meaning that it is going to fall in between the whole numbers of 12 and 13. So if I have 12, 12.5, and I have 13. Now I want you to kind of guess. Do you think that it is going to be closer to 12 or closer to 13? So take just a second. So if you said closer to 12, you are probably right. If we think about the distance between these two, the distance between those two is 8. The distance between these two is, man, my brain just went blank on me. That's 17. So it is probably closer to 12. So you may guess 12.1, you may guess 12.2, 12.3. So somewhere over here is where it is going to fall. It's going to fall between 12 and 12.5. Again, we'll go back and I'll show you how to do those here in a little bit. The next one is the square root of 118. So I'm going to go back up here to my chart, and I'm going to say, where does 118 fall in between? It falls between the square root of 100 and the square root of 121. So I know it's going to fall somewhere in here. So between the square root of 100 and the square root of 121. So the whole numbers of 10 and 11. So I want you to guess on this one. Where do you think it is going to fall? Do you think it's going to fall close to 10? Or do you think it's going to fall close to 11? Is it going to fall in front of 10 and a half or after 10 and a half would be my guess, the way to think about it. So if we think about distance here, this one is 18 away. If you think about distance here, it is 3 away. So if you guess that it would fall somewhere over here between 10 and a half and 11, you are correct. It would be somewhere between 10 and a half and 11. The last one that we're going to look at, and we'll go back and I'll show you how on your calculator how to get the estimate with it using your graphing calculator. So the last one we have is the square root of 7. So I'm going to go back up here. And I'm going to scroll down going, okay, where does the square root of 7 fall in between? Oh, it falls between the square root of 4 and the square root of 9. So right in here somewhere. So I know it's going to be between the square root of 4 and the square root of 9. So it's going to fall between the whole numbers of 2 and 3. So I have 2, 2.5, and I have 3. So again, thinking about where is it probably going to be closer to? Is it going to be closer to 2 or is it going to be closer to 3? So again, if you get that little distance idea, this one's 3 away, this one's 2 away. So do you think if we're thinking about that 2.5 being our split, is it going to fall closer on the 2 side or closer on the 3 side? If you guessed the 3 side, you're probably right. Now, is it going to be close to 2.5? Maybe so, right? Because that 3 and that 2 gives us that kind of that split there. So give me a second. I'm going to change up my devices.